So, did we talk about how the affliction of hatred is used in the path? We talked about how desire could be used in the path, right? To generate a bliss consciousness. The bliss consciousness becomes fused with a wisdom consciousness in the sense that the bliss consciousness itself realizes emptiness.
May I ask just a quick question on that, actually? I mean, it doesn't seem like you have to use bliss in the tantric path. I mean, when we were looking at the action tantra, there was no gazing and...
Correct. Isn't it amazing?
And in the highest yoga tantra, it seems like you don't actually need an actual consort. I mean, an actual consort. You don't need an actual consort.
To achieve enlightenment in one lifetime, you have to have it.
Right.
Otherwise, you can use death.
Right.
And it's said that Tsongkhapa, because he didn't want to show the aspect of using a consort in his practice, instead achieved enlightenment in place of the intermediate state. Do you achieve enlightenment in the intermediate state? No, in place of it. The intermediate state never starts. So yes, it's most significant that Tsongkhapa in his own writing does not insert anything about gazing in his section on Action Tantra, despite the fact that he distinguishes the four tantras by way of those means. In other words, he does not have a source within Buddha-Guya or Tharabodhi, and therefore he doesn't bring it up. He's got one or two sources that he cribbed from Pudern about an Action Tantra deity that does some gazing in that other section, right? So I think it's really a testament to him in the Action Tantra section that he doesn't fake it in that section. In the other section, what can you say? He's trying to maintain this highest Yoga Tantra division of all of this huge scope of tantras into four.
Well, if it did come up, do you know where it would come up? Or is it... I mean, if there was actual gazing. Or if
Well, he gives one or two quotes.
Uh-huh.
Where would one insert it?
Right.
Well, within the six deities, you have form at the level of form deity, right? Well, why not go on to the seal deity? That's how my mind is going. Why not go to seal, and that way then the form will be complete. And you could imagine a consort at that time and gaze. But why would you do it then? If it's for the sake of heightening the mind realizing emptiness, it should be done somewhere, around the point of the Tantra Tapatewa thing is in. The meditative stabilization, bestowing liberation at the end of sound, really. It would seem that would be the more practical point to do it at. But there could be bottom lines on which you could do it, and then times when you would have to do it, say, if one insisted that this was part of the Action Tantra path, which he obviously doesn't insist on. It would seem at the end of the Mene ki something, Dane ki something, is it something or thing is it? Anyway, the concentration abiding in Mene Dane, in fire or in sound, somewhere in there.
I was thinking after that because
After.
you're developing calm abiding and really...
Oh, it is with, yes, you're right.
Liberation is when you
You're
really,
right.
emptiness comes up.
It's at the end of, yes, very good. The end of abiding in sound, right? Is when you have calm abiding, is that it?
Fire.
Mene, Dane.
Then, that's when calm
Correct. And then you're into meditating on emptiness, so sometime during your cultivation of the very last step to enhance it. So, afflictive emotions. It's, as the Dalai Lama put it somewhere, it's easy to understand how desire is used in the path. But, how to use it in a positive way? How to use hatred in the path in a positive way? Just get mad? That's the American Buddhist way of doing it. When you get angry, you're practicing Tantra. You're like those deities on the wall.
I heard the Dalai Lama distinguish between hatred and anger.
If afflictive emotions can be used in the path, all of them, you would think, could be used in the path. You would think. What about wrong view?
Yeah.
You're supposed to, that's the next question, is how you use confusion, ignorance in the path. So what about hatred? How are you going to use hate? How could one use hatred in the path? So the root afflictive emotions are desire, hatred, and ignorance. All the others can be included in there.
I would want to make some kind of connection between hatred and neja, like from the start and the first principal aspect of the path. That somehow your hatred and
The wish to leave
desire
cyclic
for
existence.
renunciation are going to be related.
That's what Gendon Trimpel says in his, what I've entitled The Tibetan Arts of Love, Durbe Danger. He says that he's trying to break down the difference between the religious world and the secular world. And so he's talking about faith and faith and desire or something share the quality of both liking their object. And hatred and renunciation share the quality of dislike of the object. No. That's too minor. I mean, it's like saying in the sutra system, you use the afflictive emotion of desire in the path, right? By having children. That's extremely extraneous. This has to be something where you generate a mind of hatred and use it.
Well, it's similar to a mind of desire because it's so focused. I mean, when you're really angry or really hating something, you're not really thinking.
So you're going to generate a hateful consciousness rather than a bliss consciousness that realizes emptiness. It's interesting. There's not a single word to that effect. I wonder if it is that, though. What the Dalai Lama, how he answered his own question was that there's a lot of power in hatred. And to use my own English, you'd be co-opting the power of the hateful consciousness and bringing it over to the wisdom realizing emptiness. Whereas with the bliss consciousness, it remains blissful. The desire element drops out. With the hateful, upset consciousness, it can't remain while you realize emptiness. But I suppose its power could be co-opted. It's an interesting tease to try to figure that out.
What's the distinction between the bliss and the desire?
The desire gives rise to the bliss, the pleasure, the wanting of the object and the feeling of pleasure. Feeling of pleasure. Different, right? What about confusion, ignorance, dumbness? How are you going to use that in the path? Here, what do? You generate yourself as a deity, and you do it's really stupid.
It seems like you don't interact with whatever afflictions are right. You don't get involved. It's not getting detachment, I guess. Maybe.
Well, the word equanimity, for instance, there's equanimity out of ignorance, which is neglect. And that's to be avoided at all costs or at all times. I mean, if you look at Tripitaka Mala's way of using desire in the path for those who are distracted by desire, this is not the highest type of disciple. You're generating a mind of desire, it would seem, and in the midst of that, you start and you embrace the consort and so forth in imagination, or does he allows for actual if you get down lower. And I guess you bring the path consciousness into that situation. It's like going to a fearful part of town and trying to calm yourself down and eventually succeeding at it. Bringing another type of consciousness into that situation where you were usually afraid. And so here, doing those very things that make you so desirous and distracted, but gradually bringing realization of emptiness and impermanence, whatever, into that situation. So maybe with, I'm just speculating, with ignorance, His Holiness did mention that there was one instance of a deity where this was ignorance, it was confusion that was being used in the path.
But if
Although,
someone has ignorance, it's not like they're going to go to do something so they can become ignorant. They're ignorant.
yeah, but I'm wondering if you would actually generate this sort of mind and then like look at the entity of the mind. You see, do something different with it than the usual
It was,
Does the word recognition become important for Tsongkhapa in understanding issues like hatred and ignorance in terms of recognizing their true nature as being wisdom? Or is that something that's outside of the terrain?
Well, I mean, I think that's what I'm talking about, recognizing the luminous and cognitive aspect of any consciousness. I, at one point after my hospitalization in '91, I was on some sort of drug, and at night was literally in a, it was going duh, 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 duh. And at some point I thought, oh, I could use this mind. And I sort of looked at the entity of the mind. Oh, it was marvelous. It was great. I lost it after a while. That's too bad. So I wondered, oh, maybe that's how it's done. It's like recently in Philadelphia at the convention, the way I had my car there, and the way I had to pick up people at the Marriott a few times, I got lost every time. Every time. And Philadelphia is not a difficult city. It's small, it's center, you can look around, you can see where the center is. And yeah, but the convention center, the relationship of the convention center to the Marriott escaped me. I'd go into a parking garage, I'd come out a different door than the one I went in, thought it was the one I went in. I'd know, I would have worked it out real carefully. Come out, turn left, take another left, take a right, you're there. I come out, turn left, take another right, and I'm way farther out, and I don't know if I'm north of it or south of the center. I got no idea. I'm looking at the signs, and I can't. Why does it say S there? Does it mean S in that direction? So, yeah, I could easily reproduce this mind, which I suppose I just did, and look at the entity of that mind. Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, let's get to this. So, if we need to block out what the Dalai Lama is doing, just to get a handle on In his introductory section, what is he doing? That I read out loud last time? What is he establishing and so forth?
So it's the new schools first he's putting together.
Yes, he's explaining what?
Why they are essentially the same, fundamentally the same.
Yes, so that he can,
Then contrast them to the old school.
yes, make a dual comparison rather than a fourfold comparison. Okay, that's one of his points. What else? And so, as sort of subheadings under that, he shows, so-called, shows how, and that is pejorative, Gagyu and Sankhya don't differ that much, and Gelug don't differ that much. Then, what else does he do?
In part, doesn't he do that by lineage and gets into who they get these teachings from, Milarepa,
He does it partly by lineage, yes.
not just subject matter?
Yes. Lineage, and that's getting into how he does it, which is good. Tracing Gelug teachings on Guhya Samaja back to who? Marpa. Marpa's the big one he makes, which of course goes back to Naropa. The important thing is getting it back to Marpa, somebody in Tibet. Then, well, how does he do it in Sankhya? So he merely declares, with regard to Sankhya, based on a statement of Kedrup's, Tsongkhapa's disciple, that though they differ, they're getting at the same thing. Okay? That's how he does it. And then, next phase within this preliminary phase, what does he first do with the old school? He clears away certain qualms about the old school. So he presents a series of arguments to show that the old school is authentic. In order to counter, give me the obvious,
People look down on
people look down on the old school. Right? So, what are the sort of subheadings in here? Number one, Tsongkhapa studied with a Nyingma, Namkha Gyaltsen. Then there are clearly a number of Nyingmabas who achieved enlightenment. 3, Namkha Gyaltsen, some people say it was a Gyaltsen. Sorry, a Gautama. But anyway.
Pachin Lama, first Pachin Lama says it's okay.
He says it, does he? Where's that?
Page 205.
And before that, so he quotes some important Gelugpas who say Nyingma's okay. Bottom of 203. Now, why does he do this? Does he feel that you need Gelugpas in order to prove that Nyingma's okay? Are we unearthing here a prejudice on his part that for Nyingma to be okay, you have to have Gelugpas who say it? What do you think his intention is?
I think he's sensitive to the people he's speaking to as being pro-Gelug or
Yes.
pro-Sarma, and he
Yes.
wants to speak to their mindset
Exactly.
by saying, you can't put down the Nyingma school in this way.
Yes, because your own books say it's okay. Okay?
There's the important point that even though the Panchen Lama says that the view in the old and new schools are the same, that the Nyingma is an affirming negative and that the new translations are a non-affirming negative. And
Now, oh yes, right in that section. So, within that section, this is 205, bottom third of the page, he's introducing one of the problems that he's going to discuss later. That, here we have the, what is it? First Panchen Lama first Panchen Lama was not an abbot of Dashilam. You might think so, because the Panchen Lamas came to be known for that. But it's the retroactive calling, as I remember. Anyway, you see, I forget it, so I'm referring you to something else. So, I think an important technique, let's see, he's dropping in here a seed of something that he's going to discuss in detail later. How could these two views come down to the same thing if one is of an affirming negative and the other is of non-affirming negative? He drops the issue here, comes back to it later. Good.
Yeah, I think it's a little foggy, or I feel it's a little foggy about this distinction as opposed to what he was doing before, is that the other Sarma schools are not going to go with the Gelugpa on this point. So you're left, he's now making a contrast between Nyingma and Gelug specifically, and it's no longer comparison of the three Sarmas against the Nyingmas alone.
I think it's true. He lumps the three new schools, and then he makes the comparison between Nyingma and Gelug. The vocabulary choices and so forth are from those two schools. Thus, the first part serves as a justification, in a sense, to narrow it down to Nyingma and Gelug. Oh yeah. And pointing out, say that within Sakya, there are those who go more in the Nyingma direction and those who go more in the Gelug direction. So, it's important to notice that he's narrowing it down to Gelug and Nyingma discussion. So, and at the very end of the introductory section, or this part of the introductory section, is the end of the second paragraph in 206, in which he indicates his indebtedness to Dzok-chen, Jigme Denpa Nyima, who died in 1926. Later he says that, right? That he felt that Dzok-chen, Jigme Denpa Nyima, came and patted him on the head. You know, like, you've done a good job here. So, then what does he address? So it's, once the Panchen Lama says they're all getting down to having the same thought, what is, as he says, the frame of reference? Where are you going to turn? The Sutra systems or the Tantra systems? Which? Sutra or Tantra? Tantra. Within Tantra? Action Tantra? No. Highest Yoga. And within highest Yoga, Mahayoga and Guhya Samaja?
If I'm not mistaken, the first translations of the Guhya Samaja were during the early kings, yeah?
But the emphasis within Gelug is on tantras like Guhya Samaja, whereas the emphasis in Nyingma is on different tantras. There was certainly a study in Nyingma also of Guhya Samaja, but the new translations were done for the new schools, and their concentration is not on Dzok-chen, just as in Nyingma it's not on Guhya Samaja. So, His Holiness passes away the issue of, could this be a comparison between Nyingma Dzok-chen and Madhyamaka, right? Some Gelugpas wish to compare, believe it or not, Nyingma Dzok-chen with the practice of calm abiding. And criticize it for being a misapplication of the techniques for generating common binding. So, for the Dalai Lama to say this is not even about Madhyamaka is to, also eliminate all the other miscomparisons. All right. Now, then what does he go on to talk about? He talks about the view in Gelu, in higher yoga tantras such as Guhya Samaja, and the view in Dzok-chen. How does he get at the topic of view?
Is this where he's talking about the fundamental mind of clear light?
Well, that'd be pretty hard to refer to any part of the rest of the chapter that wasn't.
It's one thing I looked at, and there's a difference in them dividing between the objective view and
Exactly it.
the
If you'd read this chapter, you would have seen that that was the very next thing he brought up.
two truths, Yogi-tawa, you mentioned, and the enigmas don't make this division.
So the first is called Yogi-tawa, which really means view as object, the object that is viewed. And if it, sometimes we translate it as objective view, but it hardly creates a sense of, I've translated it that way, maybe that word here, but it means a view as object. What is viewed? And we usually wouldn't, would we? Your view of society? I suppose we wouldn't be talking about your consciousness, but the way you see society as structured or whatever. And Yojen Gedawa. So remember, when Tsongkhapa presents the view that Sutra and Tantra do not differ with respect to view, which one is he talking about? Object view. So what is the object that doesn't differ between Sutra and Tantra? Emptiness. The emptiness of inherent existence. Right? So then that means that there is a difference with regard to view as subject between Sutra and Tantra. What is that difference?
The one in Tantra is the heightened state of mind.
Okay, the heightened state of mind that realizes emptiness. And specifically in highest yoga tantra, okay? You could say that in the three lower tantras there is no difference in that even if that consciousness is heightened by the three types of desire, it's still on a coarse level. Okay?
Excuse me, what is the most subtle consciousness that realizes emptiness in sutra?
There is. Oh, the most one?
I mean, what is the?
They're all on a coarse level.
Yes, but what is the least coarse?
The mind of direct perception of emptiness. It's totally non-dual, etc., etc. So you can follow the last paragraph on page 207. Any problem with it? 4 lines from the bottom it says, they differ greatly in terms of the subjective view. What does they refer to?
Madhyamaka and Guhya Samaja.
Yes, Madhyamaka and Guhya Samaja differ greatly in terms of the subjective view, right? What we just said. The consciousness that is realizing it. According to Tamsik Dorje, now this is a very interesting one, a Mongolian from Khalkha. I don't know his dates. When the view of the great perfection is taught, it also is divided into 2 categories, objective and subjective. So someone earlier was saying that it's only in Gelug, right, that there's this division of view as object, view as subject. Well, in any case, Tamsik Dorje makes this kind of a division in Nyingma. Whether he's bringing it over from a Gelug description or not, who knows? But the Dalai Lama is willing to bring it up here in any case. Or at minimum, I mean, it's once he's a Mongolian from Khalkha, once he's a Mongolian, the suspicion is that he's Gelug. Suspicion. It's not bad. It's not pejorative. But I don't want to go too far on that, because there are even, for instance, somebody like Dindar Haramba, great Mongolian scholar of this century, who used to smoke, and he's in his tent one day smoking a pipe, and somebody came by because there's a monk, you're not supposed to smoke in Tibet, and there's nothing in the Vinaya that says you can't, but by tradition you don't smoke, and so he hung his pipe on a shaft of light that was coming in the tent, indicating that if he wanted to smoke, it was all right. Well, why somebody who could do that would want to smoke, I don't know. Anyway, he wrote an interesting commentary on Nyingma text, which is called the Yunden Zerki Chendo. Now, what is the subjective view here according to the great perfection or great completeness? The object view as object, is the emptiness of inherent existence again. So now, in the great perfection, the term, he says, view, dawa, refers to the view as subject or to a combination of the two. And so he's emphasizing that, just as in Gelug, the fundamental innate mind of clear light is like the topic, so in Nyingma, the, whatever you want to say, mind vajra, rikpa, is the topic. Yes?
But this is sort of slippery, isn't it? Generally, most perfection don't make the distinction between subjective and objective, which he goes on to say later, doesn't he?
It's interesting that, well, I would answer that there's not a non-interest, or there is an interest in the absence of inherent existence in the practice of Dzok-chen. In the stage of breakthrough, what one is using are Madhyamaka reasonings to get at the emptiness of inherent existence. So I don't think the application of the terminology is unfair. The application of the terminology of view as object and view as subject is, say, totally unfair, as long as he himself is saying here, as long as he takes it on so quickly to view it as mostly referring to a union of these two aspects.
Is that terminology, view as object and view as subject? I guess it's common to Madhyamaka discussions.
Well, that's an interesting point. If I can't verify that, it's throughout Gelug, because all sorts of distinctions can't be made without doing this. Do they bother to do this in Sakya even? Never mind Gogyu. Never mind, meaning it would be, it'd be more likely in Sakya and maybe less likely in Gogyu. Maybe. We approach these things with such gross misconceptions about the distinctions that are made in the so-called somewhat less debate-oriented schools. That, for instance, if you read the 8th Dharmabha on Madhyamaka, it's, people will hold their nose and say, oh, the Gagyu sect is just like Gilu. It makes as many distinctions, different distinctions, very different. Makes as many distinctions as now people hold their nose and say, oh, it's the same verbal junk that we wanted to get away from by becoming Gagyubas. So they'll all have to become Nyingmas until you read Mipam. And then Mipam is tremendously concerned about these very same, making distinctions, not the same distinctions. Okay. So now, he tries to make the point at the end of this next last paragraph in 208, that in the great perfection, the mind that takes emptiness as its object is not an ordinary or coarse mind, the kind that's described in the perfection vehicle, but a subtle mind. It's Rikpa, it's etc. Now, I don't know why, frankly, he used the term the fundamental innate mind of clear life. It strikes me that that's a switch to the Gelupa vocabulary in the midst of this sentence. And I didn't have a chance to ask it back to him. It's what he said, so I put it in. It's a bit unfair, though. If you're somebody's editor and you have a qualm, you've got to get back to the person, because they may have just slipped up. A little Gelupa vocabulary slipped in, meaning which is the equivalent of the fundamental innate mind of clear life. But it does say it is the final status of phenomena. Now there is a statement that Rikpa, within Nyingma, that Rikpa is ordinary mind. But of course, ordinary mind there is not ordinary. It's not the, you see, the Dalai Lama's statement, I think, is carefully qualified, because he says is not the ordinary or coarse mind described in the perfection vehicle. When it is said that Rikpa is ordinary mind, it's generally meant that you don't have to stop the coarser levels of consciousness for it to manifest. You can notice it in the midst of any consciousness. The angry consciousness, the desiring consciousness, whatever.
Does it mean that you can notice it even within those, or does it mean
Yes.
that it's part of the basis
Notice.
of
Get a hold of it. Identify it in
mean
the
that-
midst of that.
does that mean that those faulty consciousnesses are entirely different from the awareness, the
No, it means that they're the basic mind is the core of those other awarenesses, and that's why you can get a hold of it in the midst of those awarenesses. And as you pay more and more attention to it, those awarenesses will disappear.
I guess I'm not quite understanding the word core when it's
Well, she's asking a most profound question under the guise of, well, I'm just wondering, what core means. Would you clarify to me what core means? That's how I get out of answering the question.
How about this? How
It was
is
succinct.
that wild states of mind can arise from or in connection with pure mind?
Of course. That's why Gelu separates out the fundamental innate mind of clear light and puts it in a drop inside the center of the heart so they can separate it out.
But they still say that all consciousnesses are clear and knowing.
Yes. And so then there's great amount of debate about that. Correct, absolutely. But they aren't wisdom consciousnesses. They aren't bliss consciousnesses endowed with the Buddha qualities. So I should ask you. Now, he launches into a discussion about what? Concordant ultimates. Especially in Swatantrika, the autonomy school, the other division of Madhyamaka, the emptiness is called the actual ultimate. And the mind that realizes emptiness is called the concordant ultimate. Tunba. Now, one thing that further complicates the issue that he does not bring up here is that an emptiness that is known by an inferential consciousness, an emptiness that is known by an inferential consciousness is called a concordant ultimate. Even though in strict Gelugpo vocabulary, it's an actual ultimate, whether it's being realized by inference or whether it's being realized in direct perception. So here it is that, or the reason why emptiness, when it is realized by an inferential consciousness or conceptual consciousness, is called a concordant ultimate, is a case of the, what do you say? I want to call it the imperfections of the subject. The subject isn't up to the level of direct perception, being carried over to the object. But that introduces a wall. You know, it's hard to follow the text. When you hear the term concordant ultimate, you can't think right away, oh, this is a mind realizing the ultimate. It might be the ultimate as realized by an inferential consciousness. And then, in Gelug terms, is that really a concordant ultimate? No, it's an actual ultimate. But it's called a concordant ultimate. Now that that's clear? Now, one reason why he gets into this section is to show that even in Gelug, the mind realizing emptiness, even in Madhyamaka, is called the ultimate.
But not Prasangika.
In Prasangika also, you can carry the terminology over, yes.
But
it's not the actual ultimate. It's
but
called
this applies to Prasangika too, the break?
Yes, you can carry it over to it. There's no reason why it can't be carried over to it. So you see, he's trying to break down, I believe, the distinction. Some people make a big deal that in Nyingma here you have a sort of combination of subject and object being called the ultimate, and in Gelug, we just call the ultimate the emptiness of inherent existence. He's saying, come on now, even in Gelug, in Madhyamaka, the mind realizing emptiness is called the ultimate, a concordant ultimate. And he's going to say, similarly, the mind of clear light is called an ultimate stage of completion. Stage of completion of the ultimate.
According
Well, yes, then you have to step back, exactly, and say that's a concordant ultimate, not the actual ultimate. But the texts themselves say this is the ultimate. You see?
But if it's the ultimate, you get to, it's an affirming negative.
It's what he's saying. He's suggesting that in Gelug,
You have an affirming negative.
the Gelugs are very close to having an affirming negative themselves. They keep having to do footwork and say, oh, well, that's just a concordant ultimate. It's not the actual ultimate. The actual ultimate is the emptiness of inherent existence. He's saying, look, you've got to do a whole lot of footwork to keep yourself so separate. And so this section is making that point. And it's a marvelous section this way. So, from the very bottom of page 208, from the viewpoint of the two truths as posited in Madhyamaka, this very subtle mind of clear light in Nyingma would be considered a concordant ultimate, right? And an actual conventionality, not an actual ultimate truth. For in the Middle Way school, an actual ultimate truth is an object found by a consciousness distinguishing the final mode of being of objects, that is to say, emptiness. Whereas an object found by a consciousness distinguishing a conventional object, anything except emptiness, is a conventional truth. Are you with me? With him? However, the two truths as they appear in the text of the Great Perfection are not those of the Middle Way school, because they are not based on a distinction between object and subject realization of reality, but accord with the unique understanding of two truths in the highest yoga tantra. So then, what are the two truths in Nyingma? The very end of the next paragraph, he says, the second to last sentence, conventional truths are coarse, adventitious phenomena, whereas ultimate truth refers to what is fundamental and innate, the mind vajra that always exists. This is the unique presentation of the two truths according to Great Perfection. And he uses as his source Jigme Denpa Nyingma. And Than has translated this section.
One question came up here, but maybe you'll cover it. Is there a difference between mind vajra and subtle mind of clear light?
No.
They're the same
So
thing?
mind vajra and rikpa in Nyingma will be the same thing. And then he's drawing an equation with the fundamental innate mind of clear light in Gelug. Equation or... Well, I think he's drawing an equation, don't you? Equation's even worse than synonymous. When I was in kindergarten, the teacher said 1 plus 2 equals 3. And I said, forget it. And she said, equals, equals, somehow she indicated equals means exactly the same as. I said, there's no way that 1 plus 2 is exactly the same as 3.
Kindergarten?
Yes. So you can see I quickly learned not to talk. But they also said the house is red. That's impossible. So even though the terms ultimate and conventional that are used in Nyingma, in Dzok-chen, are the same as those used in the Middle Way school, their meaning is different. I think don't get hung up on it, right? And we should take care not to confuse them. So then you see, now he's doing just what I said. he's going to come back to Madhyamaka and say, look, the term ultimate is used in many different ways within Madhyamaka. For instance, in Maitreya's, oh, that's interesting. Lama. Oh yeah, well I know it in the next text. I see, speaks of ultimate and conventional refuge. Gee, if I was a good commentator on this text, I could tell you what conventional refuge is and what ultimate refuge is. Anybody know? And his discrimination is good. Probably conventional refuge is.
Buddha and the Sangha.
Yeah, it's you got to do it within the context of the three jewels. You don't go to.
Dharma and Sangha instead.
You think so?
Yeah, and Buddha is the ultimate.
Ultimate refuge.
Yep.
So in Geluk, usually it's done the other way around. The ultimate refuge is Dharma, and the other two, I don't know about conventional. People do it different ways. Discrimination in the middle and the extreme describes the ultimate in three ways. One is the objective ultimate, turn down. That means ultimate as object. The object that is viewed, emptiness. The practical ultimate, dhruva turn down. The practice ultimate as practice, in terms of practice, is the wisdom consciousness of meditative equipoise. Why is it so ultimate? Because it overcomes obstructions. And the attained ultimate, toba turned down, is nirvana. Ultimate is that which is attained. So he's saying don't get fixated that the term ultimate has to have just one meaning. Then he says, for example, in the interpretation of the 5 stages of highest yoga tantra. So let's stop there because that'll bring up the topic of the 5 stages in highest yoga tantra. So now, reread this. Don't spend a lot of time, but reread it because you've got other things to do.
Do we?
Do you? You don't? At the end of the semester?
Would you like me to find this intensive Dzok-chen? If we have it?
They're really nice and they're not very long.
I would like to see it again.
Okay.
Then I'll hold it. We do have.
Okay.
I'm not for sure. If I can find these.
Gurudeva
There's a chance that I would.
was staunch Gelugpa, removed it from
What's that you did where you
and then Dzok-chen.
Yeah, whenever. I think that's
So it's
Are we maybe gonna do that if I didn't find anything?
yes.
Yeah, it is there. Alright.
It is there.
To my recollection, I made a card for it. Whether that means it's there.
Carry it back there.
You know why it was like removed?
Because that's
Because it's pro.
She would like to tell you the answer in this class.
Why it should be so interesting is it's a, learned Mongolian. Mongolians tend to write clearly and versed in Gelugpa terminology, who really dug meaning.
Isn't that the same for the Dzok-chen
Yes.
monasteries and stuff? They have a tradition of doing Gelug studies and then
Yes, Gelug studies for Sutra and Yuma for Tantra. In this case, here's a purebred Gelugpa who, I don't know how it was, got turned on to Yuma.
I'm going to try. I already called up.
you know where Dzok-chen's impetus to do that came from?
I don't. You probably find out by asking the current Dzok-chen. He comes to Providence.
Who what?
He comes to Providence. He's got a center in Providence.
Yeah, well,